Session. Welcome everyone to part 2 of this morning's session of our Leadership Summit here in District 7390. The title of our summit is Keeping the Peace, Leading During Challenging Times. So we were just entertained and educated from internationally recognized conflict resolution expert Nabil O'Day, who spent an hour with us talking about different styles of personalities, leadership styles, and ways to manage conflict. And now with us today for part 2 is the president of the Rotary Club of Colonial Park, Barry Buckingham. So Barry Buckingham is going to lead us into a discussion that builds on some of the principles that Nabil showcased in his presentation on dealing with different personalities and moving initiatives forward within a club. So Barry, thanks so much for being with us today and sharing some techniques you used in your club as you dealt with different personalities and moving your club forward during these really challenging times.
Thank you, Juliet. So my experience with Rotary started when I was a little kid. In fact, my father joined the club, the Rotary Club of Colonial Park, when my mother was pregnant with me. So I've been around Rotary literally all my life. We had a lot of foreign exchange students stay in our home when I was a kid, which helped me a lot in understanding and being open to different cultures and that sort of thing. I eventually was a student. At the time, we were called Rotary Ambassadors. I went to Denmark after my junior year in high school and eventually joined the club. I got a note from David. My father was his doctor. I hear that a lot. Anyway, I was in the club. I joined the club about 14 or 15 years ago, and I was asked to be president a few times, and I declined, and I finally agreed. And during my time before that, I was on the board as the sergeant at arms, which in our club traditionally was a person who doled out fines to collect money for our scholarship program. And but we started to see some conflicts and difficulties, and then we went into the pandemic, and I started to use a more typical sergeant at arms approach, which was to take control of the meetings and try to keep them more under control. So when I was asked to be president-elect, I learned through the grapevine that there were conflicts in the club about concerns about our foundation. We formed a foundation about 10 years ago, and the foundation was formed so that people could make donations to the club that would be tax deductible. And the foundation was formed by a group of past presidents. And frankly, I trusted them all, I knew them all, and I believed in their mission and never really concerned myself with how they were running the foundation or anything like that. But I started to find out people used to come to me and say, the foundation's doing this, did you know the foundation's investing money and we don't know what's going on? And they're spending club money to go on retreats and so forth. So I felt like as the president-elect, it was my job to find out what was going on and see how we could correct this problem. The other, so I would call that a perceptual conflict, it turned out. And the systemic conflict of COVID was there at the same time. So what I did was I went to the people at the foundation, the president who has been president from the beginning of the foundation. And it's turned out to be much bigger than we expected. For example, this year, we will be giving out $93,000 in scholarships to high school seniors from the 5 schools in our area. And So I think as the money grew, people began to ask questions. As I talked to people about what they believed and what they heard about the foundation, I found out that one of our senior members paid for these retreats out of his own pocket, and no Rotary money was used for it, and no foundation money was used for it. I found out that they have an investment chair and an investment committee who decided, and actually the investments were based on what the donors had requested. So they didn't just donate money for that year, but they had donated money to fund their scholarship over several years, and in their donation directed the foundation on how they wanted that money invested during that period, which the foundation adhered to. And the treasurer is a CPA, and he has worked very hard to meet and make sure that we followed all the federal guidelines. So that's why I say it was really a perceptual conflict. But sometimes when people get the perception and we often hear the phrase perception is reality, and some people couldn't let go of that, even though I circled back to talk with them about what I'd learned. And so I'll get into part of the solution after I talk about the other problem we had. The other difficulty we had was that instead of the committees running the club, the president ran the club along with our longtime secretary who's online with us here, Steph Ackery. And then subsequently, she turned it over to Bruce Rocher as she decided to move to Mechanicsburg North. I learned that there were some conflicts between people. This guy's too mean, this woman's too harsh, these kinds of things. And so I started to put out, we have a president's message in our newsletter each month, but I started to put out notices from the president-elect. And I spoke about some of the things that Nabil talked about. We all have different skill sets, and not in these words, but if you didn't volunteer to run this fundraiser or this event, then you have to let the person, we're all leaders in Rotary, so you have to let the person who's running it run it their way. If you have polite suggestions or whatever, you should share them. And but I really realized that that I needed to do some preparation for my presidency year. So I set up a series of meetings for opinion leaders and the stronger personalities in the club. And I reached out to them and met with them. And then I took a week of vacation and met with each of my potential board members or folks who had agreed to be on my board. My president-elect and I met with them for lunch or breakfast. Some of them were by calls. But we talked with them about the plans for the next year, got their input that I had, and I used the input of the original meetings with the opinion leaders to set up my plan for the new year. And one of the big things I heard about was that there were factions within the club. It wasn't fun anymore. There are some people who don't participate. And for the newer members, they didn't know anything about what the senior members had done. So in my preparation, I worked through all of that. I think the fact that we sat down with each of the board members, and the other thing was that everybody in each lane of service or each board position was doing the entire job by themselves. Now we have a club that's now about 57 to 60 members. I think we just passed 60. We were at 90 some and almost 100 for a while. The fact is that we needed to spread the work out. And so we actually devised a 2-year plan, which my president-elect will be implementing the other half of in his year. And really, one of our senior members described it as we have rubble, you're going to lay the foundation, and then the structure will be built in the next year. And I think that's kind of how it works. So we set up a group of committees and we asked people to chair those committees. And we were able to get most of those chairs filled, and we've got some people that have joined on to those committees to help with the various projects. One of our other problems was new members were not engaged right away. So as we got new members in the last year, within the last year or so, we've moved them into roles immediately, whether it was chairing a committee or being a part of a key committee. Those things have helped to get the people involved immediately in Rotary. We're also setting up a onboarding process that used to exist in Colonial Park, which they called it, I think they called it a fireside chat, where the person who sponsored the new member and one of the membership committee members would meet with them and talk with them about the benefits and the responsibilities of being a Rotarian. But the other thing I did was I changed the way that I ran meetings. We have, in the beginning, we always traditionally had an invocation and a pledge of allegiance. I bought a banner that shows the four-way test. So, and I've noticed the other clubs I've visited do this as well, so it's not unique. But we recite the four-way test every week. And I think that's helped us to stay focused on what we're doing there, even if you've been in the club for a long time. And in addition to that, I wanted to add something upbeat at the beginning of every meeting, not just go into announcements and 50-50 and the sergeant at arms, those kinds of things. And I added in the first week of every month, we have a classification speech. So whether it's a classification or reclassification, we have a member speak. The next week, the second week, we have Rotary training, which I had done some reading online about different clubs and responsibilities of different lanes of service. And I got one of our senior members to chair that committee, and he's actually enjoyed it a great deal because he's learned. We had 1 month, we talked about where the motto, service above self, came from, what the original motto was, how it changed, where the four-way test came from, and various things like that. But it does help to fill in the gaps for newer members. And even I've learned a lot of things from this particular segment. We picked the second week because during the school year, that's our student of the month meeting. And so we wanted to have the facts about Rotary presented when we had students of the month to give them and their educators and parents some more information about Rotary as they're there. And the third week of the month, we have recognition of a late or senior member of the club. And one of our members took the chairman responsibility for that. And he either interviews one of the senior members to talk about their Rotary experience and what they've done in Rotary. And my purpose in that was new people would say, you know, kind of, who are those old guys sitting over at that table? What do they have to do with this? And they see them as not very active, but many of them have been in the club for many years and put in a lot of time and effort. And I think it's good to let the newer people know what these senior folks have done for the club over time. And of course, some of our late members had tremendous influence on our club. And so we've had members who still were acquaintances of theirs or knew about them speak about them and what they brought to the Rotary Club. So that's the third week. And in the fourth week, I, as president, recognize someone or a committee from the club and talk about what they're doing or why they are the Rotarian of the month, or I don't always make it Rotarian of the month. It can be just an acknowledgement of a committee, but the goal here was to start off every meeting with us applauding and celebrating one of our Rotarians or a group of our Rotarians or our history. And what that's done is brought a more positive beginning to every meeting. And then we go into the meeting on a good note and not just moving into the business of the meeting. And of course, the presentation. So those were the ways that I addressed the relations, the perceptual conflict about the club, the other thing we did was the Rotary training time. Our foundation meets quarterly. So the club meeting, after that meeting, we have a presentation by the foundation. We've also added a foundation paragraph to every newsletter, and the transparency that that's brought to what happens in the foundation has alleviated folks' concerns about how the foundation is. And I want to emphasize that this was a pretty significant conflict. Some members were saying, hey, no foundation members came to our golf outing or whatever. And so what we really just modified the terminology and said, no, a lot of Rotarians did not participate in this. Some of them happened to be foundation members, and some of them are not. So what we've really focused on is the foundation is a subset of the membership. The foundation board is a subset of our Rotarian family. And we don't want to differentiate, differentiate them in that way. And in fact, they're giving additional time to something that's brought great service to our community and great recognition for our club. And we want to laud that as opposed to having that become a source of conflict. The personality conflicts, some people said this person or that person always has to have their way and whatever. What I've learned, and this is a tip for you, president-elects, identify the opinion leaders, and usually they have some good things to say. But some people need to feel important, and so I contact them on a regular basis, ask them how they think things are going, what could I be doing differently, and you need to engage those people who feel like they, in some ways, you could call it manipulative, but really I learned things from those conversations, and it helps me in my role as president to have that information from them. So I truly use it in a positive way, but it also has the positive impact of making them feel important, and they are important, and every Rotarian is important. But some people need to be recognized as important, and so you can make that effort to help them. The other things we've done, I say a lot of the things I've done. First of all, I've done nothing by myself. It's been a team effort with my board and members of the club. They really do a great job helping me, and the engagement of the members has brought them to a place where they're busier and they're happy to come to the club. They've made other friends. I see people changing tables, which was not common when I was first in the club. In fact, we had a group of people who came together and assigned seats periodically so that people sat with other folks from the club that they did not know. And of course, we encourage new members to sit at all the different tables in their early time with the club to get to know the various members. So those are those things. The other thing that I've done with our Um, our board meetings are at 7 o'clock on the second Thursday of the month, 7 a.m. And they were always running till 8:30, and people were saying, I've got to leave, I have a meeting, and all that kind of thing. And I actually stole this from a previous CEO I worked for. We created for the board a consent calendar, and all the reports are submitted a week in advance, and our secretary puts them out to the entire board. And we don't review each report, so we don't go around the room and have every person report. Instead, you're expected to have read those reports before your meeting, and you then are so anything on the consent calendar, all I say is, does anyone want to extract anything from the consent calendar to discuss with the board? If not, those things are approved with one single motion, and we can get on to the issues at hand. My meetings, the longest meeting I've had so far this year has been 45 minutes. They average 25 to 30 minutes, and that gives people a lot of time back in their day. And what I really found sitting on the board was that when we went around the room, you know, everybody chatted and whatever, and I don't have any opposition to that. I'm actually, in some respects, I can't remember which bird it is, but I'm sort of like the owl that likes to talk and talk. But and by the way, I promised Juliet to get you out of here by 4 o'clock because she has dinner plans. So no, I'm kidding about that. But anyway, so that's what I've done, and I certainly don't think that I have all the answers, but I think that I've certainly seen a change. We've added 6 or 7 new members in this club year, which is a record in terms of recent years, but it wasn't me. People are more engaged. People are happier about Rotary. They're telling their friends, and they're bringing them in. One of our particularly key additions has been a young lady who runs her own company. She's 20 years old. She runs a company and is finishing her bachelor's on the side. And she was a RILA student, and she was also one of our students of the month. And she came back to join the club, and it's very exciting for all of us that we were able to get someone like that back in the club. But she's also an influencer on social media, and so she's taken over our website and all of our social media activities. And that is a real blessing for us older heads who aren't as good at that. So with that, I'll do a quick public service announcement. One of the things I implemented in this year was to have a fundraiser rather than asking each member of the club to donate their prescribed $45 to the International Foundation. We decided to have a fundraiser, and we needed something on which to focus that would attract people's attention. So we are having a Polio Plus fundraiser, which includes a dinner with a beer pairing, and also an artist from Nashville is coming up who's written a number of songs that you would recognize. He did not popularize them, but he wrote them, and he will be performing at that event on March 11th. So if you're interested in learning more about that, go to the Colonial Park Rotary website, and you can buy tickets there or learn more about it there. So with that, if you'll add to the chat any questions you'll have. I noticed some people have sent me some things already, but of course I didn't have time to read them because I'm pontificating here. So
you're ready to be a PDG there, Barry.
That's right. So if Juliet, if you can tell me what those comments and questions are.
Sure. So there's a question from MJ who says, Barry, how much time do you devote to the recognitions at the beginning of the meeting? We often run short of time in our 1-hour meetings. This sounds great to do, and I would love to implement this.
3 to 5 minutes. 3 to 5 minutes usually. And depending on, I usually my president-elect, and we have monthly program chairs that the president-elect manages. And those program chairs let me know, or through them, and they let me know how long their presentations are going to be so I can monitor that. And being president is, I think president-elect year was more difficult than president year, but during the meetings, you don't really get to enjoy them as president, I'll tell you that, because you're busy managing the time, making sure you don't forget anything. And for another hint for you folks is I prepare an agenda for myself beforehand, make sure I don't miss any announcements, make sure I don't miss any of the pieces of the meeting. So that's that.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
So I also had a question that was posed via direct message. So this participant really likes what you're doing with your board as far as getting reports out a week in advance, having a consent agenda, which shortens the meeting. Are your board members really compliant with doing this? And
Yes,
how
they
did you
are.
get them to be compliant?
Well, I just told them that's how it's going to be. And what I learned a long time ago, I was an ambulance chief at 24 of a volunteer company. And what I learned from that was if you tell people what the deal is when you start, they just do it. You know, they want, if they want to be on the board, they're willing to learn what it is you want them to do. And so if you start off, and I think that having those individual meetings ahead of time and talking to them about what my expectations were for the board helped that a great deal. And you know, you have to have a deadline for your board report. It can either be the night before the board meeting or it can be a week before that.
So it sounds like the carrot is, you know, if you get these reports in, we can have a consent agenda and a shorter meeting. Otherwise, we'll drag it on.
That's right. And,
Okay.
and people were tired of the long meetings. It was, you know, you're always sort of, I have this obligation to this, but I've got a job and I need to leave this meeting. And so being a morning meeting, we needed to make some adjustments.
All right. Any other questions? And district leadership team, if I missed any and you see some in the chat, let me know. I believe someone asked, maybe not everyone understands what a classification talk is, if you wanted to expand on that.
So classification talk is, you know, we're not at Rotary to pump our businesses, but it gives people an opportunity to talk about their work. And for example, my classification is medical economist. Not everybody knows what that is. So I described what that is, why I was in Rotary, and a little bit about my family.
Great. Any other questions? And you can open up the mic, your mic, and take yourself off mute if you do have other questions, or pose them in the chat for Barry, and we can forward those to him. And Barry, if you want to put your email address in the chat, maybe some people want to talk to you privately, offline.
Sure.
If they have some special things going on in their clubs they need your advice on. So that would be great.
Okay.
Hi, Barry, it's me, Carmen. I thought you were a parrot.
Hey, what bird are you, Barry? What do you think?
He said I'm a parakeet. I don't
I
know.
thought that's what you would have been.
Thank you, Carmen. I'll see you at the Polio Plus fundraiser, Carmen. Let's see.
All right.
I'm putting
You know what? I think we'll come to a close. Barry's going to put his email in the chat so that anyone can reach out to him if they have some, you know, if they'd like some special advice that Barry can give them about club dynamics and boardsmanship. I mean, these are a lot of great topics. As current district governor Greg Staub will be our district trainer next year, so I'm sure he's taking notes. These are topics that we can bring to the district via some online webinars, just related to running effective board meetings, for example, and how to make the most of your time with your board. So at this point, I am going to screen share in the district bylaws, which we do have to follow, which come from Rotary International, is a mandate that we must share our budget. You know, we have a budget committee.